Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's live webinar called Inclusive, hosted by an institution of structural engineers called Inclusive Recruitment, What You Need to Do. I will be your chair today. My name is Mara-Tafadzwa Makoni. I'm representing the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers in the UK. I will begin by introducing, I suppose, doing a bit of an introduction of my background, I suppose, as the chair, and then I'll pass on to our other panelists, Matthew Devine, divisional director at Cordant Engineering Recruitment, and we also have Andrea Reynolds, who's the director of structural engineering at the SmithGroup. Just a bit of background about sort of my role here as chair, really. I work for an organization called the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers, which was formed in 2007 primarily to promote awareness of engineering and opportunities for Black and minority ethnic groups within engineering. It was formed in 2007 by Nike and Oli Folian, and so we've been going for about 13 years, and it was really primarily targeted at addressing three key issues around the awareness and promoting and addressing challenges and barriers to inclusion within the engineering sector, particularly around BAME groups. So one of the problems we sought to address as part of AFBE is we're looking at things like, for instance, we have studies that show that the lack of role models and basically put off more than a third of young people choosing STEM careers in STEM. So one of the things that we sought to do to address this is to introduce an initiative called Making Engineering Hot, where we work with schools. We call it our outreach program, but we primarily work with communities with support from a lot of our sponsors or corporate partners, where we work with students in communities where students are between 12 and 16. And the objective there is to understand how to actually bring awareness around engineering, to bring role models, and to basically bring visibility or in terms of other sort of BAME engineers to students within these within the outreach communities, but also to work with communities in such a way that parents, who we often find to be at the very heart of influencing decisions around whether their children actually study STEM, to make them understand and relate to engineering as an actual engineering and STEM careers as a relatable career choice. So this is a brief slide that talks about making engineering hot. We run a lot of activities, whether it's bespoke, standalone, one-day activities, or an actual developed a curriculum, which is like Saturdays, usually take place over Saturdays, over weekends, where we tailor make a workshop to support teachers and career advisors within schools. And we use that to enthuse and motivate students around engineering or STEM careers, but also an opportunity to partner with employees to give these young people exposure to engineering careers and through things like work placement and work experience. The second part of what we do was around understanding that sometimes the decision about hiring are made so instantaneously, and we've had situations where a lot of students that we work with, and this is around university level, where they feel they're not as well prepared for their job interview, particularly because they're perhaps in certain parts of the community where they don't get as much exposure, or we talk about students who this is the first sort of opportunity to have a formal job. So the first time they've gone to an interview in a formal structure. So what we do to address this and to give students the best chance at actually getting or securing a job within the engineering sector is we have a program called Transition. I'll come back to the slide later. Transition basically is where we run simulation of interviews with students and run mock assessment centers. It's an opportunity to prepare students for their first interview and to give them sight of and mentoring for their careers within the engineering sector. One of the things that we also established from this is, particularly from students from BAME origin, they tend to struggle securing a job within the first 12 months. We do know that statistically, your chances really, if you don't secure a job within 18 months, it really reduces your chance of actually being employed if you haven't secured a job 18 months after graduation. So one of the things that we do at transition is we spend a lot of time preparing students for that interview and by running these mock assessment centers. And to date, I think 70% of our students actually have secured a job within transition students that we've worked on this program have secured a job within the first 12 months after graduating. I'll go back to this flowchart here, which is very, very important to us. And this is something we've spent a lot of time trying to understand barriers to inclusion. So if you can see what's on the screen here. So what it tells us effectively, what we have found is actually engineering, from a BAME perspective, engineers are actually BAME individuals actually are represented within engineering. So you've got within engineering at both at STEM level, at high school level, college level, and also within universities. So within universities, you get about 32% of engineering students are actually from a BAME background, but actually only less than 1% tend to will make it to a Russell Group university, meaning that actually, since most companies tend to focus a lot of their recruitment efforts in that sort of Russell Group recruitment circle, then effectively you're only targeting less than 1% of the actual engineering quota within that student within university, which sort of then explains why, when you then look at the professional element of it, you have less than perhaps only 8% of engineering is people from only 9% rather people from engineering are from a BAME background. So these are the sort of things that we start to then look at, some of those that going from 32% in actual university actually going straight to 9% and looking at what some of these barriers to inclusion are. Hence, we do a lot of work with the non-Russell Group universities, again, to mentor students and to prepare them for their careers within engineering. One of the other programs, the last point I wanted to talk about was maybe some of the work that we do around the second element, which is the actual retention and progression. So a lot of young professionals often find it difficult to get the right opportunities on big projects that they work in a company, which would then help them within actually going through progressing within their careers. Of particular interest to us was the fact that a lot of students from sort of BAME or BME background tend to change job. So basically use their job as a stopgap, as a way of navigate, as a way of actually progressing through the careers, or where they've experienced a lot of barriers within as far as progression is concerned, they then default to things like contracting. So it's another area where we work with called where we have programs like Real Projects Program, which is to basically empower early engineers in industry with providing technical lectures and interactive sessions, and bringing real high-profile projects to the forefront, exposing them to these real projects, exposing them to senior people within the industry, so they can start to map up their career. So one of the other events that we run is a roundtable, which again is another opportunity to really understand a lot of these. So it's sort of a Chatham House style opportunity for us Chatham House ruled opportunity for us to understand a lot of these challenges faced both within recruitment from a diversity and inclusion perspective. How do we recruit and how do we retain? And what are these perceived elements of where there's perceived discrimination, of actual discrimination, but an opportunity to actually feel what stops people from feeling that sense of belonging within the organizations that they work for. So we have, I'll skip through the award ceremony for now. So these are some of the corporate sponsors that work with us as members, which include most of them, not all of them, quite a number, but it includes most of the professional engineering institutions and a lot of the engineering professional services consultancies, both large and firm and other engineering corporate partners, including and academic partners as well. So that's it for me. I will now hand over to Andrea Reynolds, who's the Director of Structural Engineering at SmithGroup. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Mara. And good morning, everyone. As Mara said, I'm Andrea Reynolds. I'm the Director of the Structural Engineering Department at SmithGroup, and I am based out of our Detroit office, which is in Michigan. And to give a little background on my company and myself, I wanted to start by giving some background on myself and my company to frame some of the experiences that I'm drawing from today. My company itself is the oldest continuously practicing architectural engineering company in the United States, perhaps even the world. We have about 1,300 people throughout the country, mainly spread throughout the United States, but we also have an office in Shanghai. We offer services in a variety of architecture and engineering disciplines. And why I wanted to point this out was because of our geographical diversity within our own country, as well as the diversity of the services that we provided, we're able to maintain business for so long. It's actually nearly 170 years that we've been in practice, and that diversity really has helped us weather things like the Great Depression, which is what has made us the oldest continuously practicing firm. Now, looking forward into the future as we go on, increasing diversity of our staff is another way that we think can really help us keep in business for the long term. Myself, I'm quite involved in the industry and have been throughout my career. And there's a couple of experiences in particular that I wanted to draw from here. In some of the committees that I've been a part of, I've held leadership roles and have often found that in pulling together committees or panels, discussing membership or who the participants should be, diversity always comes up as a topic, especially of late. There's been some very specific situations, particularly in dealing with the licensing side of things in the United States, where we're asked to provide a diverse pool of volunteers, not just from the perspective of race or gender, but also in terms of people in academia versus practitioners, company size and type, geographic location, experience level, etc. However, when we do this, we often find ourselves most challenged in balancing the gender and racial side of things, naturally. This had led to many discussions about what does diversity really mean to us, or rather, how much diversity do we really need to provide and why? Are we providing diversity just for the sake of diversity because we think it's the right thing to do? Or if we do that, are we truly being representative of the industry? Are we going to question are people going to question our sincerity if we're doing this? And is it even possible to reflect the diversity of the people that we're serving if we want to do that? Mara's data suggests that it may not be, just looking at the numbers. However, if we provide diversity to reflect the industry as it currently stands, are we being inclusive enough? Are there systemic issues with entry into the industry that we are preventing or discouraging minorities from participating? Which, again, Mara's data may suggest that that could be the case. The best solution perhaps the best solution could be reflecting where we would like the industry to be, not necessarily where it is today, and not necessarily what the public that we're serving looks like, but somewhere in between. So in doing that, how do we know what the industry looks like? The structural engineering industry in particular, how do we know what that looks like today? I don't know how it is throughout the world and trying to gather this data, but I can tell you in the United States, that data isn't necessarily something that's easily accessible. A lot of people, I think, are afraid or nervous of asking the question of what race people are or what gender they fall into. Looking at our professional organizations or rosters of licensed individuals in any particular state in the United States, we can find some basic information about people, but generally race and gender are not two of those things that are reported. So one of the committees that I'm working with is part of the NCSEA, which is the National Council of Structural Engineering Associations. We've been trying to make some progress in trying to understand the makeup of the structural engineering industry at large and the drivers related to engagement and equity within the industry. The committee is called Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity, SE3 for short. Our mission is to raise awareness and promote dialogue on engagement, retention, and equity in our profession, to attract and retain the best talent, and to ensure all structural engineers have a pathway to success in their careers. Some of the ways that the committee is working towards this mission is by conducting a biennial nationwide survey. This survey started back in 2016, predominantly in California by one of the member organizations of NCSEA. In 2017, this effort became a nationwide effort as part of the national committee itself. And we've conducted a survey in 2018, as well as we just finished up this survey in 2020. The challenge with the survey itself is we're only getting data from people that responded to the survey, not necessarily the industry at large. But at this point, that seems to be the best source of data that we've been able to find as far as what does our industry look like. Some other ways that SE3 is accomplishing their mission is by providing resource guides and topic briefs. As we sift through the data that we've gotten on the 2020 survey, we hope to issue regular topic briefs on specific topics, whether it be recruitment, it could be regarding pay, it could be work flexibility, a whole host of different topics, but we want to do it in steps rather than waiting for one report so we can get that information out quicker. And then the final way that we're working towards our mission is outreach and partnering with other professional organizations. To date, most of that partnering has been done in the United States. And obviously with events over the last 6 months, some of these efforts had started prior to things happening in the United States. But a lot of that has gotten a lot more traction over the last several months as far as partnering with these organizations and seeing what we can do to combat some of the systemic issues that are going on. You can find links to learn more information on the screen if you would like to hear more. And another thing that we just started, our first edition came out last week of Read, Watch, and Listen, which is a curated list of resources on diversity, equity, and inclusion, brought to you monthly. Each issue will feature one article, one video, and one audio recording on a given theme to facilitate education in matters that affect our profession. Again, this link can be found in the upper right hand corner of the screen. So I have a couple slides here that I wanted to dive into some of the data that we have found in the survey. And like I said, we're sifting through the 2020 data currently, so this data is from 2018. But when we look at the gender balance in our industry, and again, I want to highlight that this is data from engineers that have reported to this survey specifically within the United States. So it's not necessarily reflecting what the entire world looks like or what the gender balance is in the UK. So what does the industry look like? Based on this, we can see that about 68.4% of our respondents were male, where we had 29.6% that were female. This was out of approximately, I believe it was 3,200 respondents, like I said, from the 2018 survey. For the 2020 survey, we actually had more than 5,000 respondents, so quite a few more. Part of that is because we're getting the word out about SE3 and also highlighting that SE3 isn't just about women in engineering or about minorities in engineering. It's really intended to be about everybody and being more inclusive overall. And one of the things we've seen as we've had more respondents to the survey is the percentage of women has actually started to come down. I believe what I had seen in the preliminary data was that we're reflecting about 24% of the industry being female. So one thing I naturally did as kind of a first comparison was, well, what does my company look like? So when I look at my company, we're actually 46% female. And part of that, when I consider it, is, well, we do have other disciplines. It's not just structural engineering, where my data on the screen is from structural engineering in particular. And some of those disciplines, architecture, interiors, typically have a higher percentage of females than structural engineering does. But when you look at our actual structural employees, you can see that within my group, 50% of our group is female. Is that because of some of our recruiting practices? Maybe it's partially just because I am the lead of that department and handle the majority of our hiring. Maybe it's because females feel more comfortable working in a department that has a higher percentage of females. So another piece of data I wanted to share was what we found in the survey throughout the United States, again, of the racial balance. And you can see that the industry, the structural engineers within the industry in the United States are predominantly predominantly white. So it's about 80% white and about 20% other races, minority races. And when you look at those data, those numbers, you can see that over nearly half of that is Asian. When you look at the Black engineer respondents, is less than 1%, which is pretty consistent with the data that Mara shared with us. Again, I wanted to compare it to my company, and 31.7% of all of our employees are non-white. And again, I was pleased to find out that my department is leading this and above average on that, where we are 50% non-white. So I wanted to share some of the things that we are doing as a company to try to be more inclusive in our recruiting. And on the following slides, I have a couple of these ways. But the one thing, first and foremost, that we have found is really creating an inclusive and diverse culture that gives people a voice and makes them comfortable to use their voice. Educating ourselves and our staff to recognize where bias may exist and providing recruiting tools to help identify the right people to hire are also ways of doing this. And finally, what we're finding more recently too is really taking a look at our client list and the project types that we're working on can also send a message to our staff as far as how inclusive we really are being. So one project type in particular that we have tended to stay away from in the past for these reasons are prisons and jails and basically institutions of mass incarceration. So the first way I wanted to share in looking at our recruitment is really widening our search. Often candidate pools are comprised of individuals with similar educations, backgrounds, and experience levels. Sometimes we need to get creative of where we're advertising openings for positions to help reach a broader pool. Perhaps reaching out to professional organizations that primarily serve minorities. WISE is one opportunity for looking at increasing female applicants or finding female applicants, or perhaps reaching out to organizations like Mara's with BME, or for us in the United States, we have an organization called NSB, which is for Black engineers. The candidate pool may also be widened if some flexibility is offered either in daily work hours or telework. And now that we've all proven that we can work remotely, this should be, perhaps this could be something employers might be more willing to do. But a lot of times you find that females and perhaps minorities are not able to maintain a career in the industry long term if we don't offer those flexibility options. Another option for entry level may be reaching out to different universities. We traditionally in the past would typically look at specific universities. Maybe some of our hiring managers really liked going back to their own alma mater. But what we've been trying to do more recently is reaching out beyond that. Because if we only reach out to one or two schools, we're going to only get students from those schools, and they're going to be trained similarly. They may think more similarly. Their backgrounds might be more similar. So increasing that pool that we're looking at and the different types of universities that we're going to can help change that. And one thing in particular that we've been highlighting in more recent years is going to colleges that are historically Black. Another practice that we use in inclusive recruitment is involving diverse people in the hiring process. Really considering the optics of who is involved in a recruiting and interviewing process is important. We need to not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. Just saying that we're diverse doesn't necessarily cut it. People aren't necessarily going to believe you if you say that. We've also found, some people may say, well, we do have a diverse staff. I'm going to walk you around the office and show this to you. But then you also may have people looking at it and saying, well, it's odd that I do see diversity when I walk around, but when I talk to people, particularly depending on how many people you may talk to in the interview process, if the people that you're only talking to during that process are white males, it might send a message to some of those minorities that you're trying to reach. That perhaps either they might at least question, what is my opportunity here? Does this mean that, am I going to have opportunities like this if I'm not seeing people that have the same skin tone or perhaps the same gender as me in these roles? And another way is something that we started, I think about 3 years ago, which is an EDI scholarship program. So Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Scholarship Program. At our company, we're focused on exploring ways that we can provide or we can design a better future. We know that one of our opportunities to achieve this objective is by promoting efforts to create a more diverse workforce in our industry. In support of this goal, we started this scholarship program. And the program was established to support and mentor students from historically underrepresented groups, which include Black, African American, Hispanic, Alaskan Native or American Indian, and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. In architecture, interior design, planning, landscape architecture, and engineering. The program's mission is to provide these students with the opportunity to attain their professional goals while advancing the architecture, engineering, construction industry, and improving the built environment. In addition to providing money towards tuition, the scholarship recipients also serve as paid summer interns in one of our offices. So not only are we helping them with tuition, but we're also giving them something to put on their resume. And we, despite the events of the last summer, we still did offer these scholarships to applicants. I believe we had 5 scholarship winners this year. Not all of the internships, unfortunately, came through the way we expected them to, since we were all transitioning to this new work-at-home situation. But we have just submitted or just posted for the 2021 scholarships and are accepting applicants as we speak. And then the final way I wanted to share with you that we're boosting inclusive recruitment is our investment in the future. So perhaps the biggest challenge we face in improving diversity within our office is mainly related to the talent pool that is available. Both the results Mara and I shared showed some staggering data explaining perhaps why we're not seeing the applicant pools that really could help us boost diversity. So when looking at the data for Detroit specifically, it's even more shocking. The sharp contrast of the percentage of Black residents in the city of Detroit, which is about 80% Black, versus the incredibly low percentage of Black architects and engineers in the industry. And, you know, the results that Mara and I shared, showing the percentage of Black individuals in engineering, or specifically in structural engineering, is really no different when you look at the architecture discipline as well. So if we want to be more representative of the community that we're serving, we need to increase that talent pool. And really, in this situation, it's playing the long game. It's not something that we're going to reap rewards from overnight, but it's something that you need to work on continuously. So this is the 40th year that we've had what we call an exploring post in our office, which exposes students from the metropolitan Detroit area, predominantly high school or secondary students in the city of Detroit and other surrounding communities, to get excited about architecture, engineering, and interiors. We have them come in about every other week into our office. Of course, this year we're having to get a little creative with how we do that, but we have different setups where they can really do some hands-on work and try to understand what an architect does every day or what a structural engineer does every day. And you can see we have them build some fun structures in the process. In addition to that, because in a lot of cases, sometimes by the time students get in high school, it might be too late for them to really have the base that they need to get into a career in STEM. We're actually doing more and more outreach to the Detroit public schools in particular to see how we can get students engaged even earlier, whether it be elementary or in middle school, to try to encourage them that, you know, math and science can be fun and could be an opportunity for them to find a career path in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew.
Thank you, Andrea. As Andrea said, and Mara earlier, my name is Matthew Devine. I'm the Divisional Director for Cordant Engineering Recruitment. I've been in the recruitment industry, specifically engineering, for 21 years. Not specifically structural engineering, but across a wide scope of engineering recruitment, and there's some examples on screen there of businesses that I have specifically partnered with on diversity and inclusion projects in the last few years. Bureau Veritas, General Electric, Veolia, ABB, Schneider Electric, British Engineering Services. That has been around women in engineering and gender balance. You can see that the Women's Engineering Society and WISE. Also with regards to BAME and ethnic minorities. But interestingly, just to add in another area as well here, more recently with Equal Engineers around neurodiversity, whether that be dyslexia, autism, ADHD, and really fascinating to see what people with those challenges and from a neurodiverse background can add into an engineering business and their strengths and core talents that they can add in. Our business specifically launched a diversity and inclusion project a number of years ago, and been asked to share some of the findings or points, discussion points and takeaways for everybody today by the iStruct team, and thank you for Michael and Ryan for inviting me to do so. If I give you one figure from that project, we looked at it, and for the people that we were placing into engineering roles 2 years ago, the figure that was female engineers was less than 5%. And in the space of 2 years, we got that figure up to 23%. And the recruitment industry average is 13%. So it can show you the shift that you can have with a concentrated effort, both as a recruitment business and employment agency, but also a concerted effort in partnership with our clients. Historically, when we discussed this a number of years ago, my line was very much, the recruitment industry has never discriminated in my experience. You know, we can be seen as quite ruthless in that we charge a fee or we charge a markup, and we're not necessarily bothered who gets the job as long as we get our margin or our fees, probably how we're pictured. But certainly we don't discriminate, because for us, we want the applicants. The applicants are our lifeblood. And so we accept all CVs. What was pointed out to me in a number of different sharing sessions a few years ago is that's reactive. And I think quite a lot of businesses are reactive, and that they don't necessarily turn away applicants. They don't necessarily discourage applicants, but are they proactive? And I suppose some of the points that we've worked on with the clients there and the organisations there, and some of the points I'm now going to share, are around being proactive to ensure that you're getting that diverse workforce, but also retaining that diverse workforce, rather than just being reactive or feeling like, well, I don't discriminate, so that's enough. It actually isn't enough. It's about being proactive. So if we look at this, we talk about diversity and inclusion, and the first thing that we discuss with our customers and with our partner organisations, and it's something that Andrea touched on earlier, is that the inclusion piece actually comes first. If you're an inclusive business, then the attraction and the retention to a certain degree will take care of itself. First and foremost, you have to ensure that you've got a fair, transparent and merit-based internal career opportunities that are visible to all. From an inclusion point of view, people look at it from a short, a medium and a long-term view. And they will want to know that from the first day that they join a business to 5, 10, 15 years down the line, they will be treated fairly, and that their career opportunities and their learning and development opportunities will be merit-based, and they will be transparent, and they will be fair. So things like career ladders, progression plans, all those different things need to be transparent and fair and merit-based within a business. I think next, a flexible and considered approach to each individual colleague. And again, Andrea touched on things like meet the teams. If you're showing somebody around your office and you're allowing them to meet your team and you're allowing them to discuss with potential future colleagues, will those colleagues be talking about how they're treated on a flexible basis, how their individual needs are met? I think a business must nowadays have coaching, mentoring and support mechanisms company-wide. Certainly we've seen this year that the health and well-being of our employees and our colleagues can be challenged. And so support mechanisms are key within a business, but also the coaching and mentoring to allow people to develop and flourish within a business. Policies and procedures, these can be monitored, these can be measured, these can be audited nowadays. Our own business achieved ISO 9001 in the last 12 months. And all of these things are a good guide as to how your policies and procedures are written and how they're being actually worked day to day. But make sure they're inclusive, make sure they're accessible, and make sure they're actually adhered to, make sure that they're embedded in your business. The next one probably is really key for me. Is that you must have senior management engagement, and the senior management team must be on board. They must have been trained. They must have the support, and they must be very keen to set the right example. I was at a presentation last year where the idea of leaving loudly was discussed, and what that meant is that a business had flexible working hours, and people were afraid to go ahead with their early finish or go ahead with their flexible working because the managers or the directors didn't particularly follow the flexible working plan themselves. And a new director came in the business and said, well, I'll leave loudly. And when that director was leaving early to pick the kids up from school or to go away on a family weekend or whatever that might have been, he left loudly. He told people that he was using the flexible working scheme. He told people that it was there for a purpose. And so I think it's really important that a senior management team are engaged, receive the training around diversity and inclusion, and then support others around them and set the right example. Again, there's a lot of stats, there's a lot of data that shows that diverse project teams succeed and deliver better results. So again, you're looking at having diverse project teams, think tanks, diverse events, diverse employee networks in place within your business. And coming back to that point from previously, work-life balance schemes that put the employee first. I think those points on that initial slide, the first slide there, is about inclusion, and it's about making sure that you have the right things in place within your business before you go to market. The next piece there, and again, Andrea touched on it previously, is about then the reach that your business has with regards to getting that message out there. And I've done this with a series of questions as almost a tick list when your business is recruiting. Are your adverts, your posts, and your articles reaching all parts of your community? If you're on LinkedIn and your LinkedIn network isn't a diverse network, then your posts won't be reaching a diverse network. If you're just putting your adverts on mainstream job boards, then is that reaching the minorities, the communities, the areas that you want to reach? So ensure that you're creative with regards to the adverts and the posts and the articles that you as a business are putting out there. The second point to make is have you widened your job spec and broadened your horizons? You quite often get a situation where an engineer is retiring, and that engineer has been in a business for, let's say, 20, 30 years. So we must get a like-for-like copy. We must get somebody who can come in and do all the tasks that the previous person did. And so the job description will be tight, and it will be long, and it will be very restricted to the applicants. Can other people in your business pick up those duties? Can we attract a new, a creative, a different type of applicant? Can we broaden our horizons as to who we're pitching this job to? And are we encouraging all applications? On your adverts, on your posts, in your articles, does it actually say that your business encourages diverse applications, people from minorities? I think the other thing to then say is, even if you're encouraging that, are you on the other side of this restricting your applications through your words or through your requirements or through the portrayal of your business? There's a lot of information online that is really, really easily accessible about the type of words that will put off a female audience, a minority audience, and there are certain words there that will absolutely push a role towards a white male. Portray your business as a flexible one. Portray your business as a diverse one. Portray your business as a forward-thinking one. Accept diverse applications and say that you do so. Again, the next point down, highlight the inclusive nature of your organisation. I think the other thing there then is, are you utilising your diverse employee network through applicant referrals and through their wider industry and social networks? For all of us on here who have children, we will know that they're on very different social media platforms to the ones that we are. They're on very different groups socially than we are. So it's about tapping into your workforce and tapping into the wider social media platforms and social media groups and communities to make sure that your message gets out there. I think the final point with this regards to reaching and encouraging all, it is becoming more informal and becoming more accessible. Are you open to chats, calls, visits, questions from potential applicants? And if you are, again, say that. Put that in your advert, put that in your job description, put that in your online post. Can you give somebody a virtual tour of your offices or your site? Can you have a call with somebody and chat through any questions or fears that will encourage them to apply? I think quite often what you will find is that you may well get a diverse range of people who see your post or see your article or see your advert, but don't actually apply because they don't feel they have everything in the criteria, or they don't feel confident, or they decide to put it to one side. And sometimes bridging that gap can help you encourage somebody to apply for the role. With regards to selection, so we've got, hopefully through those points, people applying and encouraging people to apply. We've got to be fair and consistent. There has to be a transparent, measured and documented recruitment process. Remember that people can now ask to access their details that are kept within your business at any time, and they can ask to see that the process has been fair and that it's been transparent and it's been measured. What we do is we take away any unconscious biases, we take away any kind of this feeling that people recruit from type. And Andrea touched on it before, you know, if you've got 50% women within a business, then they will naturally recruit more women into the business because people naturally recruit type. But that form of recruitment can also be a detriment or can hold businesses back when trying to build a diverse workforce. So make sure that it's transparent, measured and documented. Make sure it's fair for everybody applying. Make sure that all stakeholders within the process are briefed and trained on this. So we have all been in interviews or seen interviews held or been in meetings where things are said that are greatly inappropriate, can be offensive, certainly aren't helpful and can be off-putting to the applicant. And sometimes people need training on this, guidance on this, support on this. So the internal training is key, but it has to be with everybody in the process. There is no point the person doing the first interview doing that in a very fair and inclusive manner if when further down the line the applicant comes up against somebody in the process who isn't on the same page, who hasn't been briefed, who hasn't been trained, who doesn't know the process. Obviously, we need to be asking for about reasonable adjustments, and these need to be met, and showing greater flexibility for people, especially at the moment with regards to virtual interviews, times of day, all those different things. The more flexibility, the more adaptability that a business can show up front just demonstrates again our inclusive nature. I think creative selection stages is a real key one, especially when we go back to that point of neurodiversity. Varying styles, varying comfort zones, it gives everybody their opportunity to shine. Not everybody is comfortable in a panel interview. Not everybody is comfortable in an interview full stop. Some people are more creative, some people work in different ways, and I think if you can be creative with your selection stages to give everybody a fair chance. We've run, as a business, recruitment events, recruitment open days, all different ways to try and bring out the best in people and to make people comfortable and allow them to shine. I think that's really important nowadays, that we try and move away from the traditional panel interview as a one-size-fits-all. Remember, it's a two-way process. So think of meet the teams, informal first stages, whether that be meeting for a coffee or, more of an informal discussion online. Showcasing your diversity and inclusion, giving opportunities for trial days where people can come in and have a look at the business and get a feel for the business. Q&A sessions where people can ask their own questions. Remember, it's a two-way process, and if the applicant isn't comfortable, they're not going to join the business. The next thing is ensure that timescales are agreed and promises are met and kept to. So we have all been in this situation where we've been told we'll get a response by the end of the week, or we'll be informed of the next stage in 2 weeks' time, or this is what the next piece of the process will look like, and then it changes and then it changes. I think we want people to feel comfortable, we want people to feel wanted, and we want, from a very early stage, applicants to feel like they can trust the business they may be joining. Which leads us on to all applicants should receive a response. And all applicants who've either been met, spoken to, or interviewed should receive fair and constructive feedback. Please, please, please remember, unsuccessful applicants talk. And again, Andrea and Mara talked about people going back into their communities, their groups, their social media groups. If somebody feels like they've been treated unfairly, if they've not had feedback, all these different things they will share with people. And if we're talking about such a small percentage in certain areas that are engaged with our industry anyway, what we don't want to be doing is putting off those that are engaged through, rumours and feedback and discussions within private and social groups. The next piece of this is retention. So hopefully the first part is about inclusion and getting our business in the right place, first and foremost, so we can showcase it. It's then about attracting, engaging with people, and it's then a fair selection process. Retention then is key, because otherwise we churn. And after all that hard work has gone into this, for somebody to leave your business quickly is undoing all of that hard work. And I think the first thing to remember is that retention starts before somebody even starts. So again, businesses will have applicants who are due to start on Monday that don't show up, that send the email the Friday before to say they've found something else, they've had a change of mind. So right from the start, as soon as you select that applicant and that applicant is going to be an employee of your business, treat them as such. Tell them why they've been appointed, what you liked about them, what vision you've got for them within their business, how you see them fitting in. And map out the journey from that day forth until their first week of work. The contract that you send to them, the paperwork that you send to them, it has to be accurate and it has to be reflective of what has been agreed. No fine print, no changes of working hours, changing of working patterns, changes of package, nothing like that. Straight away we lose the trust. The first day of work should be planned and communicated well in advance. We've all seen the applicant who turns up and they haven't got their IT logins, or the desk isn't ready for them, or there's nobody to show them around the office or to meet or to greet, and they find themselves watching online health and safety inductions or HR inductions. The first day should be planned and communicated well in advance. Nice touches go a long way. Introductions to people and colleagues, coffee or breakfast on the first morning to ease them in. Cards, gifts, shout-outs for milestones achieved, however big or small. Mentors, coaches, buddy systems already in place. If your business has diverse networks, working groups, upcoming social events, involve and invite them. And make sure they have full visibility of and delivery on promised development plans, employee schemes, training and career opportunities. If you've told somebody they're going to be inducted, trained, put on a career ladder, put on a growth plan, have an appraisal, make sure it happens. Make sure you deliver on what you said was going to happen. And then finally, celebration. If you do it, then share it. So it is key to have internal role models, and it sounds, you know, from Andrea's point of view, that they've got some really good ones within their own organisation. Mara was talking about, you know, having more role models from an ethnic minority point of view. Internal role models, internal champions and mentors are key. Wherever I've seen internal networks work, it's when they've had a senior management team sponsorship. Academic partnerships to then celebrate success and celebrate the business with local academia, and again, diverse project teams. If your business achieves D&I milestones, if it has successful networks, if it runs key initiatives, if it's done a successful event, it has to be promoted both internally and externally. I mentioned General Electric, and I've done a lot of work recently with a site of theirs here in the UK. They have a brilliant women's network, but it is only showcased internally. So the wider world in and around that area of the UK knows nothing about it. Attend industry events, exhibitions, roundtables. Learn from what other people are doing, as we are doing today, but also promote your own business's successes and share them. So seek awards and recognition for your achievements. The key thing is include all of the above through your social media channels, in your adverts and on your career pages, and include real life employees, examples, stories and projects. And obviously be proud of your business and your colleagues, and we'll get them to be proud too. But the key thing is to share your successes. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, everybody.
The question that we have at the moment is how effective is unconscious bias training in making a sustained impact on behavior within organizations? And this is something that I think Matthew spoke about earlier around trying to eliminate bias from the actual recruitment process. And a lot of us in organizations are often asked to attend these unconscious bias training, online classes, usually up to an hour. Do we think from an industry perspective that is enough to make that sustained impact, to change these behaviors, some of which we've covered in your talk? So I'll start with maybe Andrea first.
I guess I would say, as far as is it enough? Probably not. But I think it's a good first step. I think it's one of those things that you can't just do once and forget about it, because that's what happens is you forget about it. It's something that you need to continually work on and kind of brush up your skills on.
Matthew, your thoughts? Perhaps you could, continue off some of the elements you were covering in the later parts of some of the parts in the recruitment parts. Talking about what then are the best practices and some of in terms of getting. She talked about senior management and they need to set that example, and even things like having accountability. How do we ensure that we don't just have things like unconscious bias as a sort of tick box, that everybody in the organization is aware of how to foster these inclusive environments?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that final point initially, Mara, which is celebrating the success of diverse teams and diverse initiatives. There's a lot of data and a lot of information out there that shows that diverse teams and diverse projects are massively successful. And if you can share that within your own business, then hopefully a senior management team can see that adds value to your company, adds value to your business. It delivers. I think with the unconscious bias is something that I think Andrea touched upon before about diverse recruitment panels or diverse recruitment teams. So we're getting varied perspectives and varied ideas and varied input into a job brief. So it's trying to get diversity in your recruitment process for the people. It's trying to get a merit-based process. So, my wife works for the NHS, and your first stage of applying for a role with the NHS, people don't see anything with regards to your gender, your ethnic background, etc., etc. You're judged on merit. So it's having a transparent and a merit-based application process, a diverse recruitment team that are recruiting, but also then sharing the successes so the senior management teams see that it's actually delivering the results as well.
That's quite interesting, because one of the things there are a couple of companies have spoken about how, for instance, blind CV sifting is actually a method that's useful. But I suppose the challenge to that is in itself introduces unconscious bias of I'm trying to think of what the bias is here, because if you pick up somebody's CV, they don't have details on name, gender, and all of these things. You assume you've got that impartiality, and yet when you read through it, if somebody says, "Well, I was president of the Women in ITS, for instance, or Women in Engineering Society," that in itself can sort of it's already there. So how effective are other measures, for instance, like the use of automation? So some companies are going towards using artificial intelligence to actually do the sifting. Are there examples of best practice where you can think of where things like that have actually been applied and been successful? Because again, use of automation, I think it was Amazon who found that their algorithm that was used was actually slightly sexist. So is there potential for that as well, to actually offer the opportunity to eliminate unconscious bias from recruitment?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, because automating the process, the group that I work for, Cordant, Amazon is its largest customer. We provide somewhere in the region of 16,000 temporary workers a week to Amazon at peak, and peak is included through the pandemic, as you can imagine. And that has to be automated. The top of your applicant funnel can be 500,000 people. You have to automate that. The interesting thing with Amazon is how many applicants at some point want to speak to a person. And I touched on this before, is that, quite often when we were looking at the gender piece, female applicants would like to have an informal conversation with their potential line manager, with the recruiter, with somebody to get a sense of comfort before applying. Whereas a male applicant will just read the job spec and say, "I can do half of that, click send." So, and then we talk about anonymizing a CV. And, some companies now, I put Schneider Electric on there before, they have a set target of how many roles have to be filled by women within their business, so it can work the other way. So I don't think there is an absolute foolproof method, and Amazon was shown up with that, like you say. Even the computer was biased. But I think best of intentions is a starting point. Getting a senior leadership team into a place where they genuinely believe that having a diverse workforce adds value to their business is a great starting point, because then you are opening people's mind to just having a fair process. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is for me is within businesses getting inclusivity to the top of the agenda before any of the recruitment starts.
Brilliant. Andrea, any quick thoughts on that?
I don't know that I have any specific thoughts. We haven't used automation per se as far as screening resumes. But one thing I've done myself is trying to take a step back of, looking at not necessarily the content to do, particularly when we're doing college entry-level resume analysis. I create my own kind of scoring criteria, if you will, and it's based on what kind of degrees they have, grade point, what sort of leadership skills they're displaying on their resume. and just quickly going through, and I try to do so fast that you don't look at the names and you're not really looking at things that might introduce bias. You're looking more at what's the data on the resume and trying to score that, and then kind of sit through that to find your top applicants, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does, yeah. So, I totally understand that you actually sometimes have to be proactive in actually eliminating that bias as much as you can. So the question is, now that I have to the panelists, is what sort of things do you consider when thinking about active ways in which companies could are they sort of methods that companies should use to actively attract more and more diverse talent pool without resorting to situations where people think a bit of tokenism is being introduced into the recruitment process? Can I ask Matthew to go first if you've got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sorry, Mara. So the question is, what can companies introduce into the recruitment process? Do you mean?
Yes, to attract a more diverse talent without making it seem as if it's some kind of a quota tick box system. How do you genuinely go out and but what's the best practice in actually going to attract these females? Because I know we spoke earlier about, for instance, Andrea spoke about actually sometimes going to particularly black colleges, like I'm assuming colleges like Howard here, Andrea. Howard University should put predominantly for black male students in this situation. Are there any other forms of best practice in industry where we can then look to how do we get more minority ethnics? How do we get more female hires? What are the best practices for doing that without making it seem as if it's some tokenism?
Yeah, I think the key word for me would be consistency. So I think a lot of businesses will only kind of put something out there when they're actually recruiting. So there will be nothing on their social media or their careers page. I did a piece of work actually in the last week for a client who said to me, listen, we want a diverse workforce, we want to recruit, we talked about actually partnering with colleges and universities in Manchester. And yet when you went on their careers page, first and foremost, there was nobody. They had a group picture of all their staff, and there was no ethnic minorities within that group picture. There was nothing out there on social media or on their careers page that showed that they did anything like Andrea's given an example to. You know, if you're a business that, I think Andrea said every 2 weeks, they've got students and people coming into their business, what that shows is consistency. Shows that whether you're recruiting or not, you actually care. And you're actually looking to make a difference, and you're actually proactively doing this. And then it just so happens that you have a vacancy. Whereas if you're not doing any of that, and then you put an advert out there, that's really difficult because there is nothing online that actually evidences that you care or evidences that you're doing this. So for me, it's doing it consistently, Mara, whether you're recruiting or not, which is key.
Andrea?
This is, I'm going to say it's a fine line that you have to walk, right? Because it can come across that even in a company that is inclusive and open, I'm sure there's some staff, and particularly probably the white male staff, that might feel a bit alienated about it. So I think, one thing, when I say we reach out to like the ethnic minority universities, we're also still going to the other schools that we always have. So I think some of it's important that we're not just going to one specific place for potential candidates, that we're casting a wide net, including schools that we might have traditionally always gone to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. We've got a question from the audience, and I'll put it to both. I'll put it to both panelists here. It's Himanshu. He's completed a Bachelor of Civil Engineering he completed it in 2010 and worked as a structural engineer for 10 years in India. But he's now started a master's in structural design and construction management with sustainability at Kingston University. And his question is, how should I make my profile strong enough for the job of structural engineer in the UK or SA job market? I am a chartered engineer from the Institute of Engineers, India, graduate member, chartered and an EIT from APEX in Canada. So from an USA perspective, can I just capture your thoughts, please, Andrea? And then after that, Matthew, if you could just give us a bit for the bit on the UK side. How do you make your profile stand out?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, showing, regardless of where you're working or where you're going to school, displaying leadership in either your job positions or in school, school groups or professional organizations, I think one thing that tends to catch our eye when we're looking for potential candidates. So if you have experience like that, I would say highlight it, celebrate it.
And Matthew?
Yeah, two really quick points is number one, remember that we're now in a world where people don't read lots of text. So whether that be Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, we're all familiar with the fact that people want bullet points, bite-sized chunks. So my advice would be, similar to Andrea, get your achievements, get your qualifications, get your projects to the top of your CV, get them bullet pointed, get them to stand out, because people quite often have decided on a CV by the time they're 2/3 of the way down the first page. So you want 2-3 pages max, and you want bullet points and achievements. The other thing that I would say is that it has to be replicated on your other social media platforms. So if you've got a profile on LinkedIn, if you've got a profile on a social media platform, make sure that sells you in the right way as well, because people don't just look at your CV nowadays.